My mother was still laughing at my ordinary little life when the hotel manager walked straight past my family, stopped beside me, and lowered his voice. "Ma'am, the owner is waiting for you." I stared at him. "The owner?" He smiled. "Yes, you." For a second, nobody at the table said anything. Then my brother Daniel laughed. Not a nervous laugh, a real one. The kind of laugh people give when they think they've just heard the funniest thing in the room. "Okay," he said. "This should be interesting." My mother covered her mouth, but I could see the smile underneath her fingers. My father simply shook his head. And suddenly, I realized something. They had no idea, not even close. But to understand why that moment mattered, you have to understand how my family had seen me for most of my life. I was the daughter who never seemed to measure up. My brother Daniel had gone into finance. My younger sister, Olivia, married a surgeon, and then there was me, Emma, the one who supposedly had potential but never did anything with it. At least, that's what my family believed. The funny thing was, I stopped correcting them years ago. Because every time I tried to explain what I was actually doing, they had already decided what the answer was. I wasn't ambitious enough. I wasn't successful enough. I wasn't sophisticated enough. And apparently, I didn't dress well enough either. That evening, I had made the mistake of wearing jeans. Dark blue jeans. A simple white blouse. Small gold earrings. Nothing expensive. Nothing flashy. I thought I looked perfectly presentable. Apparently, my mother disagreed. She looked me up and down before we even sat down. "Emma," she said quietly, "you couldn't have worn something nicer?" I glanced at my clothes. "I thought this was fine." "It is fine," she said. Then she leaned closer. "It's just not appropriate for this hotel." I looked around the dining room. She wasn't completely wrong. The place was beautiful. High ceilings, crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, servers moving quietly between tables. Everyone seemed dressed as though they had stepped out of a magazine. But I didn't feel uncomfortable. I knew the hotel. I knew the kitchen. I knew the staff. I knew which elevator went directly to the private event floor. And I knew exactly how much the building had cost 6 months earlier. My family knew none of that, because they thought I had spent the last 3 years playing around with little property projects. That was my mother's phrase. Little property projects. I didn't correct her. I just smiled. Dinner started normally enough. My father asked Daniel about work. Daniel talked about a new investment fund. Olivia discussed a charity event she was helping organize. Then, inevitably, someone asked me what I was doing. My mother answered before I could. "Emma's still working with those properties," Daniel smiled. "Still?" I looked at him. "Yes, still." He took a sip of wine. "Must be nice." There was something in his tone. I knew exactly what he meant. He thought I was wasting my time. "It's going well," I said. My mother laughed softly. She's always been optimistic. I put my fork down. "Mom." "What? You make it sound like I'm unemployed." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." The table went quiet. My father sighed. "Let's not do this tonight." I nodded. "Fine." I picked up my fork again. I wasn't going to argue. Not tonight. Because I knew something they didn't. 3 days earlier, the hotel sitting around us had officially become the newest property in my portfolio. I had purchased it through a holding company. No family name. No press release. No announcement. Just paperwork. Months of negotiations. A complicated financing structure. A team of lawyers. And a lot of sleepless nights. The hotel wasn't struggling. It was actually profitable. But the previous owners had accumulated too much debt, and they were desperate to sell. I saw the opportunity. My partners saw the numbers. We bought it. And that evening, my family was celebrating my parents' anniversary in a hotel they believed belonged to someone else. That was the part I found almost funny. But I still wasn't planning to tell them. At least, not yet. Then Daniel leaned back in his chair. "So, Emma, how's the hotel thing?" I looked at him. "What hotel thing?" "You know, your little project." "Which one?" He laughed. "The one you were talking about last month." "Oh," I smiled. "That one's doing very well." My father looked up. "Are you actually making money from these properties?" "Yes." "How much?" I hesitated. Daniel answered for me. "Probably not much." Everyone laughed. Even my mother. I smiled too. But inside, something had shifted. Not anger. Something calmer. I had spent years wanting them to understand me. Now I didn't. And maybe that was the difference. Because when you stop needing people to believe in you, they lose a certain amount of power over you. Dinner continued. Then the hotel manager appeared. His name was Michael Grant. I had met him twice before. Professional. Quiet. Extremely competent. He walked toward our table. At first, I assumed he was checking on the dinner. Then he stopped beside me. "Miss Hartley?" My mother looked at me. I nodded. "Yes?" Michael smiled. "I'm sorry to interrupt." "It's okay." He leaned slightly toward me. "The owner is waiting for you upstairs." I frowned. "The owner?" He looked confused. "Yes." I glanced around, then back at him. "You mean Mr. Collins?" "No." He paused. That's when Daniel laughed. "Wait." Michael looked at him. Daniel pointed toward me. "You're telling us she's the owner?" Michael's expression changed slightly. Not angry, just confused. "Yes." Daniel looked at my father. My father stared at Michael. My mother slowly lowered her glass. Michael continued. "The board meeting is scheduled for 8:30. Miss Hartley asked us to keep the executive elevator available." Nobody moved. Then my mother said quietly, "Emma." I looked at her. "Yes? What is he talking about?" I took a breath. "I own the hotel." Silence. Not the dramatic kind. The uncomfortable kind. The kind where everyone suddenly becomes aware of the sound of forks touching plates at nearby tables. Daniel was the first to speak. "No." I almost smiled. "Yes. No. Seriously. I am serious." He looked at Michael. "Are you sure?" Michael nodded. "Absolutely." Daniel looked back at me. "But you said you were working on property investments." "I am." "You never said anything about owning a hotel." "You never asked." My mother stared at me. "You bought this hotel?" "Yes." "When?" "Last week." She shook her head. "That doesn't make sense." I looked at her. "Why?" "Because..." She stopped. "Because what?" "Because I wasn't supposed to have that kind of money. Because people like me weren't supposed to make decisions like that. Because she had spent years believing I was barely getting by." I didn't say any of it. Michael cleared his throat. "Miss Hartley, I'm sorry, but we should probably go upstairs." I nodded. "Of course." I stood. My mother reached for my arm. "Emma." I looked down at her hand. She let go. "Can we talk?" "After the meeting." "What meeting?" "The board meeting?" "With who?" I smiled. "The people who run the hotel." Daniel stared at me. "You're actually serious." I picked up my purse. "I've never been more serious." Then I walked away. But here's the thing. That wasn't the real reveal. Not even close, because the hotel was only one part of what I had built. And I hadn't told my family about the company behind it. The company that had started with one terrible little building 5 years earlier. A building nobody wanted. Not even my family. 5 years earlier, I had been working a corporate job I hated. I was good at it, but I wasn't happy. Every day felt like I was completing someone else's plan for my life. Then I found a small abandoned motel outside the city. It was ugly. The carpet smelled like smoke. The roof leaked. Half the rooms were unusable. But the location was incredible. I saw what it could become. I bought it with almost everything I had. My family thought I had lost my mind. Daniel called it an expensive hobby. My father told me I should sell it before I lost more money. My mother said, "Some people are simply not business people." I remembered that sentence. I never forgot it. The motel became a boutique hotel, then another property, then another. I reinvested everything. I hired better people than me. I learned from them. I made mistakes. Some were expensive. One nearly destroyed the company. But slowly, the numbers changed. The little property company became a real business. And eventually, I created a holding company to keep my personal identity separate from the properties. That was why my family didn't know. They had searched for my name. They hadn't searched for the company behind it. And I never gave them a reason to. Upstairs, Michael opened the executive conference room. 3 people were already waiting. My attorney, my financial director, and the hotel's operations director. They stood when I entered. My attorney smiled. "Congratulations, Emma." I sat down. "Thank you." Michael closed the door. And for the first time that evening, I felt completely comfortable. Not because I was richer than my family, not because I had finally proved them wrong, but because this was the room where I had earned my place. Nobody here cared what I wore. They cared whether I could make good decisions. And I could. The meeting lasted nearly 2 hours. We discussed staffing, renovations, guest satisfaction, a new restaurant concept, and one serious problem with the hotel's previous management contracts. It wasn't glamorous. It was work. Real work. At around 10:30, I walked out of the conference room, and my family was still downstairs. Waiting. My mother had sent me 6 messages. I hadn't answered. When I reached the lobby, Daniel stood up immediately. "There you are." I nodded. "Hi, can we talk?" "Sure." My father joined us. My mother stayed behind them. For a moment, nobody knew what to say. Finally, my father spoke. "How long?" I looked at him. "How long what? How long have you been doing this?" "5 years." His eyebrows lifted. "5?" I nodded. "And the hotel?" "It's the 7th property." Daniel stared at me. "7?" "Yes." He sat down. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. My mother looked hurt. "You never told us?" I thought about that. "You never really asked." "That isn't fair." "Maybe not." She crossed her arms. "We're your family. I know. Why would you hide this from us?" I looked at her. "Because every time I told you I was trying something, you told me it wasn't serious." She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. My father looked down. Daniel finally said, "So how much are we talking?" I looked at him. "That's your first question." He didn't answer. I smiled. "That tells me enough." He stood. "No, Emma. I'm just trying to understand." "You don't need to understand everything tonight." My mother stepped closer. "We're proud of you." Those words should have meant more. Years ago, I would have done anything to hear them. But standing there, I realized something. I didn't need them anymore. "Thank you," I said. She looked at me. "That's it? What do you want me to say?" "I don't know." I nodded. "I don't either." Then Michael walked toward us. "Miss Hartley?" "Yes?" He handed me a folder. "There is one more issue." I opened it. It was a contract. I scanned the first page. Then I stopped. "What's this?" Michael looked uncomfortable. "The previous owners had an agreement with a third-party management company." "I know. They're disputing the termination." I read the clause again. This wasn't disclosed. My attorney, who had just entered the lobby, took the document from me. He read it, then looked at me. "They may have a claim." Daniel immediately stepped forward. "So the hotel isn't actually yours?" I looked at him. "It is. But you could lose it." "No." "Then what's the problem?" I closed the folder. "The problem is that someone tried to hide a contract from me." And suddenly, the mood changed. This wasn't family drama anymore. This was business. And someone had underestimated me again. The next 3 weeks were brutal. Lawyers, emails, meetings, documents, negotiations. The management company threatened legal action. They claimed the previous owners had promised them another 5 years. We argued that the agreement had been breached before the acquisition. I barely slept. My family heard about the dispute, and for the first time in years, they began calling me. Not to criticize, to ask questions. Daniel offered to help. I thanked him. I didn't need his help. But I did learn something during those 3 weeks. My family hadn't suddenly changed. They had simply changed their perception of me. And there is a difference. When they thought I was struggling, they talked down to me. When they thought I was successful, they wanted to stand beside me. I needed to know which version of them was real, so I made a decision. I invited them back to the hotel, not for dinner, for a meeting. All 4 of us sat in the same conference room where I had met with my executives. I placed a folder on the table. My mother looked nervous. Daniel looked curious. My father looked tired. I said, "I want to explain something." They listened. "I didn't build this company because I wanted to prove you wrong." Daniel looked at me. "I did it because I wanted a life I respected." Nobody interrupted. "I spent years trying to make you proud, and every time I thought I had done enough, the standard moved." My mother looked down. "I don't blame you for everything," I continued. "But I do blame myself for believing that your opinion determined my value." Silence. My father finally spoke. "I was hard on you." "Yes. I thought I was protecting you." "I know." He nodded slowly. "I was wrong." That was the first time my father had ever said those words to me. I didn't know what to do with them. So I simply said, "Thank you." Then I pushed the folder across the table. Inside were photographs. The first motel, the renovation, the second property, the third, the hotel we were sitting in. My mother looked through them slowly. Daniel didn't speak. At the bottom of the folder was a newspaper clipping from 5 years earlier. The little motel I had bought had been listed as one of the city's worst commercial properties. Someone had written, "Potential redevelopment opportunity for the right investor." I smiled. I guess I was the right investor. Daniel laughed quietly. For the first time, it wasn't mocking. It was genuine. "You really did all this yourself?" I shook my head. "No." He looked confused. "I had people who believed in me." I paused. "Just not always the people I expected." My father looked at me. "That hurts." "It should." He nodded. "I understand." A few days later, the legal dispute was resolved. We won. The management company agreed to terminate the contract. The hotel was officially under our full control. There was no dramatic courtroom scene. No shouting, no revenge speech. Just paperwork. And somehow, that felt better. Because real victories usually aren't loud. They're quiet. They're signed. They're deposited. They're built over years when nobody is watching. A month later, my family attended the hotel's reopening event. This time, my mother didn't comment on my clothes. I wore the same dark jeans, the same white blouse, small gold earrings. She looked at me and smiled. "You look beautiful." I smiled back. "Thanks, Mom." Daniel walked over. "Emma?" "Yeah? Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "How did you know that first motel would work?" I laughed. "I didn't." He looked surprised. "You didn't?" "No." "Then why did you buy it?" I thought about it. "Because I knew what it was." He waited. "A mess." I smiled. And I knew that didn't mean it had to stay that way. He nodded. Across the room, my father was talking to Michael. My mother was looking around the lobby. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the outsider at a family event. Not because they finally accepted me, but because I had stopped waiting for their permission. That night, after everyone left, I stood alone in the lobby. The chandeliers reflected across the polished floor. The staff were cleaning the last tables. Outside, cars moved quietly through the city. Michael walked over. "Long day?" "Very." He smiled. "Still glad you bought it?" I looked around. "Yes." Then I thought about my mother's question from years ago. Some people are simply not business people. I almost laughed. Not because she had been cruel, but because she had been wrong. And sometimes the most satisfying part of proving someone wrong isn't making them feel small. It's realizing you never needed their approval in the first place. I had spent years thinking success meant showing my family what I could become. It didn't. Success was waking up one morning and realizing I had built a life that belonged completely to me. No permission, no approval, no explanations. Just mine. And that was worth far more than hearing anyone say, "I told you so," because I never needed to say it. They could see it for themselves.